call from a headhunter to go to consider an opportunity with National Industries for the Blind, which I hadn't heard of. And it was an organization that used business to create business via federal contracts to create opportunities for people who are blind. And I don't even think the word social enterprise entered into my vocabulary at that point, but I thought the notion of business to drive impact was compelling to me. I happen to be blind, and I thought throughout my life that maybe by being successful in the sighted world or the corporate world, I would be able to eventually maybe have a positive influence for people who are blind. And that seemed like an opportunity to maybe go from an influencer to a direct impact player. And so I threw my name in the hat and joined NIB as their president and CEO. And then 10 years later, came to Goodwill Industries International. So what compelled me is the leverage of leveraging markets and talents to drive impact and the social enterprise model. So I'm a big believer that being market-driven in everything that you can do from a market-driven perspective will be a greater element of the social impact space in the next 10, 20 years.
I began my career in business as well, so I appreciate what you're saying. Could you tell me a story about a time when you were most proud to be a part of this sector?
Well, it's always easy to reach back and think of an individual life that was impacted. So considering any individual who through the organizations I've been fortunate to be a part of, whether it's a person who kind of springboarded from homelessness to a career in nursing, or to a person with a significant disability who, is a primary contributor to their family's well-being, or an ex-offender who, as a young person, found themselves on the wrong side of the law, and now is a leader within our network who is helping thousands of people who had similar circumstances. All those individual stories are always the compelling ones that fire you up, inspire you, and make you proud. But I think what makes me just as proud and even just as enthusiastic is when I look at a Goodwill and their ability to find the sweet spot, the intersection between caring and enterprise, between business and social services, between business results and social impact. And if I look across the social impact balance dashboard or an income statement and a balance sheet, and I see those come together in a sustainable way, I see stability for communities. No, just black.
I'm sorry, when you look at the income statement,
when I look at those
sheet,
things coming together, what I see is a Goodwill built as a community asset that's both sustainable and offers a stability to the community because of those market-driven business efficiencies with a full eye towards social impact. And I think those inspire me, that scenario inspires me every bit as much as every individual life, because the system matters.
The system matters, yes, indeed it does. It's a great answer, actually.
It sounded long-winded to me, but
No,
what the heck?
no, great answer, great answer. And so these next two questions are sort of reverse sides of the same coin, if you will. And the first is, what was the worst thing that ever happened to you, and what did you learn from it?
I think society has an expectation of not-for-profits behaving like a charity, as opposed to behaving like an efficient asset for the community. And that can happen, especially in a social enterprise model, as the organizations strive to find that sweet spot between impact and income. And when you're running a complex organization and you've got functional experts, you're going to have people worrying about both. And as you create a culture in your organization, sometimes people worry more about one than the other. And I think that's actually very natural, but I think that it's really the challenge for social enterprise leaders to try to maintain that balance and that proper tension, because when they get out of sorts, people don't understand that if in a social enterprise model, you don't operate with a margin, then you don't advance mission. And I think that's probably a challenge that for the next 10 to 15 years, people in the social enterprise space have to learn to articulate and differentiate from the charitable, simply the fundraising space. They can have different drivers for success.
And so the worst thing that ever happened to you then is the need to make this case or make this argument.
Yeah. I mean, it's this is a silly example, but I had a niece post something on Facebook, and my wife just said, "Hey, donate the stuff to Goodwill." And somebody said, "All they care about is money." And I was a former employee there, and there's no doubt that a supervisor at the store level has to drive results. But yet, that's not all about money. That's about sustainability and impact. And so, how do we, find that sweet spot, both in terms of culture and communications? Yeah, I think that's, and it doesn't sound like it. I'm sure there's worse things that have happened to me,
Right.
I think Goodwill as a household brand can become a target. So when you have the disconnect from a community expectation and your ability to communicate how mission is integrated throughout that business infrastructure, that can be certainly challenging and frustrating.
And something you obviously deal with a lot.
All the time.
All the time. Every day.
Every day.
Got it. And so this is the other side of the coin now. What was the best thing that ever happened to you, and what did you learn from it?
Gosh. Worst and best are tough.
Well, you strike me as someone who looks at the glass more than half full, so you probably
typically
have great things happening to you all the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, for me as a leader of this particular organization, or for me as just a guy in the space?
For you as a guy in the space.
I think for me, the opportunity to serve both NIB and Goodwill as a guy that got an engineering degree from Purdue and an MBA from Harvard, and a guy that knows how tough it is to sell, the disability in the workplace. Thank you. The disability in the workplace as an individual, to affect systems that take that head on every day, and not only disabilities but other barriers to employment. Probably the best thing that ever happened to me, to be a part of that system, both at NIB and at Goodwill, and then use business skills and be in the marketplace as a driver. I think that's fun. So,
Cool.
so
Cool.
I feel like these are boring. I should have better stories.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And my wife and my kids, I can't leave those in there. Don't, for the record.
Oh. And how many children have you?
3.
Okay, got it. Okay. Excellent. Well, duly noted.
Duly noted.
Right. And so the next one is a little, I hope it doesn't seem morbid, but if tragedy struck and you couldn't do this kind of work going forward as of tomorrow, what's the single most important piece of advice you would give the next person to try to step into your shoes?
I think a focus on TLC.
Focus on TLC?
Talent, leadership, and culture is the key. Retaining, acquiring, and retaining the talent, paying competitively to keep the talent, and have the right leaders to inspire and motivate and manage the talent, and then having the right culture for the leadership and the talent to excel. Probably would be my what I think is the most important.
I'm sorry, the last thing, the
right culture for the leadership and the talent to excel. To perform.
I like that. And I haven't heard TLC as talent, leadership, and culture. Did you make that up?
I think I might have just made that up.
Oh, no, seriously?
No.
You see it somewhere else.
Okay. Oh, great. What is your definition of happiness?
Something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to. And I stole that.
You stole that from someone?
Yeah, I looked it up, and it was anonymous.
That's fantastic. I've never heard that before. That's amazing.
It's because I read very sophisticated spy fiction, spy thrillers.
Does that really come from one of your spy thrillers?
Totally comes from a spy thriller.
Oh, wow.
By Brad Thor with the super ass bad guy named Scott Harworth, and that was his definition. And I looked it up, and it's out there in the whatever, but it's like there's no name by it. Maya Angelou quoted it once, but she didn't say it. She took it just like I did. But the reason I think that that's a powerful perspective is because I translated in our terms, Goodwill terms, to something to do being work, someone to love being in an environment where you are supported, and something to look forward to is really, you got to have a launch pad of a job, and then you want a career to continue to grow in. So.
I really love that.
Well, that's nice.
I like to quote, very sophisticated things.
Yes.
I wish I could quote somebody like sounds real smart. Can you find somebody smart for me to quote?
I heard my uncle say it one time.
Right.
Oh, did you?
No, that's what you should say.
No, but I googled it.
And now who's the author that you like?
Brad Thor.
Brad Thor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
What is the most important thing you tell young people who are thinking about making careers in the social sector?
Don't believe that you have to not make money, and don't think that you have to do it day one. Get a set of skills that you can get either in the social sector or actually make money as an investment banker, consultant, operations expert. You can do all that and engage in the social sector in a variety of ways, and even transfer into it and bring those skills to the social sector, because the social sector needs market-driven skill sets if it's going to thrive in the future.
I agree. So, staying with the future, what new opportunities do you see for Goodwill in the next 5 years going forward? New opportunities.
I think the mission of Goodwill, and the what and the how of Goodwill are more relevant for the next decade than maybe in the 110 decades we've been in existence before. And even though we started by working with immigrants and people living in poverty in Boston in 1902, and I'm sure it was very relevant then and through our history, I think now when you look at social enterprise being, where we often get called the first social enterprise. I don't know if we were or not. We're probably the largest. Where our relevance is key, because sustainable social impact vehicles are very critical because of funding sources, less federal funding, less really even how foundations are really trying to deal with their fiduciary versus their cause goals. I just think there's going to be a stretch. So sustainable social enterprise, the how will be critical, and then the relevance in terms of job creation, skills attainment, and community opportunities are going to be key for the country coming together. No matter what political parties, company comes together when people are working, supporting their families, and feel a degree of confidence in doing that.
Your boss is very good at sound bites.
He is. He's good at a lot of other things too.
I'm sorry.
Not just sound bites.
No, of course.
I'm very superficial. A mile, an inch deep, and a mile.
And what surprised you the most, since you've had the experience of working both in the corporate world and in the social sector? What surprised you the most about working in the social sectors?
Well, I can speak specifically to Goodwill. Is when you think of leadership, management, operations, excellence, and everything you need to be successful for the shareholder. Goodwill does that. The Goodwill leaders and organizations that I've had the ability to have visibility into, I'd put up against any corporate model anywhere. and then layer on top of that integrating mission throughout that infrastructure, which raises the cost structure, and then any earnings beyond that for incremental mission activity. That's probably what surprised me the most is the capacity to lead, manage, innovate, and execute. I'd put in the 90th percentile of anything I've ever seen.
Cool.
So,
And did you said so there were three levels of in revenue that you were speaking about, and I just want to be sure that I'm clear about them. So you're saying because you were talking about something in the mission element increasing the cost. I just want to be sure I was clear
when you
about
look
that.
at the Goodwill social enterprise model, so the stores. So there's 3,200 stores out there. It is, and you think, gosh, retailer, but really what each local Goodwill, because each of them are autonomous, is really the leader has to have the business acumen to drive complex logistics, to drive and succeed in a tough retail environment where our primary competition is for-profit, and to hire people with barriers to employment who might not otherwise have opportunities, and get them trained up, skilled up, performing with a mindset for them to leave, because when a person works for Goodwill, we're happy when they go somewhere else to launch their career. So, all of that elevates the cost structure, and then you got to still compete against the, primarily the for-profit thrift space. But Goodwills also have a lot of other social enterprises that they do the same thing in. So, the revenue is one component in driving a top line in an earned income model or a sustainable model. And then effectively managing the cost structure, and then weaving mission, and then creating margin for additional mission. So that's, and I put the management across the network again against anybody. And we have very comprehensive leadership development programs, and target about 50% of the CEO leadership, the executive leadership, to come from up the ranks, and the other 50% to come from outside. So we have
50%. Excellent.
And that allows for a stability of knowledge and fresh lenses, so that there's a continual, base of knowledge and challenging the status quo.
And just to clarify, you said there are 3,200 stores, but there are 164 members, so there are 164 CEOs.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
Each organization would operate anywhere between 5 and 80 stores.
Got it. Understood.
So there's a deliberate, in terms of model, you're investing in leadership development, and recruiting from the population all with disabilities. Did I say that right? Oh, that's funny.
In terms of the leadership, we have an internal in-house leadership development program. It's multi-tiered. And that is focused on developing the senior leaders and executive leaders for the future. So that's an inclusive program across the entire Goodwill network. And then Goodwills serve, our history started by serving people in poverty, generally immigrants up in Boston. In the 30s and 40s, as rehabilitation dollars became available, there was a level of following the resource and we started serving more and more. We always served people with disabilities even in the early days, but there was a more intentional effort based on the resources. And now I would say it's each Goodwill. Some have more of that legacy. Some weave the delivery of services for people with disabilities with a broader set of programming. So it's people with disabilities. It's people who have formerly been incarcerated. That's a big part. We serve the First Lady called me and 8 or so national leaders with Dr. Biden to say, what can you guys do to hire people who are, to hire veterans and families? And every one of us said we're on the team, but we're the only ones who put real numbers on the board because we're very numbers and results oriented. And I think we've hired more than 4,000 veterans and family members, and have served more than 100,000. Yeah. So veterans, we've got programs for people who have English as a second language. So anything that creates a challenge for you to be successful. If you can't speak English well enough to work in the workplace, you could come to Goodwill and then go from there. So.
Some of our clients have dealt with nonprofit disabilities, including the art question. I was very inspired by their work development program. That was for EDOC. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. I assume that you've got lots of feeders for
Yeah. I mean, the key is to use a wide array of tools, and not in this conversation, but if you have a follow-up, I can talk to you about some of the real worst days. But I'm not ready to do that today. But you got a lot of people with a lot of opinions. And if you think about a world of sound bites, there are some things that we the work that Goodwills will do that are so substantive, but you can't explain it in a sound bite. In fact, if you really want to understand a Goodwill, you could come in. I took a group on a Goodwill tour, really smart people in the workforce space, and it was awesome. But they gave me 6 hours, and they got it all. But,
So I think you'll enjoy this one, Jim. If you could invite 5 living people to a meeting to have a discussion that would change how the social sector evolves over the next 5 years, who would you invite to that conversation, and what would you talk about?
5 living people?
Mm-hmm. Living people, yeah.
Donald Trump. Lin Morales Miranda.
Oh, yes. We love Lin-Manuel.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, yeah. Lin-Manuel. 5, golly. Dan Cardinelli. Only because I like him.
Okay.
And he's smart. Mm-hmm. And he's the head of the independent sector. Right?
Yeah.
Like a Zuckerberg. Yeah, sure. Should have him or somebody like that. What am I trying to solve? I was focused on the interesting people.
That's,
On how to shape the social sector.
yes, and have a conversation about that. What would you talk about? And 4 is maybe it's only 4, and maybe Mark brings someone with him. I don't know.
No. I mean, I would think probably, like Patrick McCarthy, a significant thinker from a foundation perspective. Jamie from the Lumina, or somebody like that. Those would be 5 people that, you got to have the social sector folks.
Yeah. And how would you frame your conversation?
I just thought I'd like to have Lynn. If I had a choice, I'd like to meet Lynn Manuel. So I don't know if he would do. I think he might be interesting in a conversation like that.
I've met him. He's a very nice young man.
Oh, yeah. Anybody who could write that musical has got to be smart.
Yeah.
Okay, now what's your question?
How would you frame the conversation? And so what we're trying to change
I would frame
the way the social sector evolves.
I would frame it based on impact, inclusion, complete inclusion. Sometimes inclusion, like every other word out there, gets narrowed. Economic success. And income, economic success from an individual total income perspective. And then I would probably say, how does social enterprise, for-profit, and not-for-profit, both, because there's kind of a continuum there, evolve into an element of the sustainability of that. Because, I don't know. It's a tough question. I don't know. That's the best I can do right now.
Yeah, great. Great. Well, we have to ask interesting questions, right?
Sure.
And we're, let's see, do I have one more for you? If there were one thing you could say to your colleagues who are leading grant-making foundations, what would it be?
And they're willing to sacrifice their lives for somebody to pray for them if the car is not on the
I think
That's part of the process.
I don't really have a one thing for because they all have their mission and their agendas, and not one of them. They're not one organization, just like the providers aren't.
Right. Okay, that's fair.
So I think. I think that as they try to evolve from, quote, supporting program to driving systems change, they should not lose sight that where the rubber meets the road is where lives are impacted. So just not lose sight of that.
Like the Rockefeller Foundation talking about resilient cities, more about systems right? Is that right?
Yeah, and they all can fall. They're all falling a little bit prey to dissing their supportive programs for, quote, systems change, and they don't have enough money to change all the systems. So don't lose sight that programs are affecting lives.
Right.
And and I would say that they and they and service providers, I think we all have to learn how to check our egos at the door and collaborate more effectively.
Conservative, in the social innovation review, Stanford social innovation, there was a study a number of years ago about how conservative foundations tend to fund advocacy and general operations, and that progressive foundations tend to fund research and programs. And if you look at the thinking in this country, it's moving to the right. So, I'm not the first person to say this, but I think that foundations should be thinking about funding more like operations and advocacy if they want to help.
Yeah, I mean, I think it always depends on what their how they define what their goals are. Foundations, at least the ones we interact with, certainly aren't coming from the conservative. They're more on the changing lives, and they're actually probably as many of the ones that I think that they're trying to do such big things they may lose sight of. Sometimes it's the little things that matter. So.
And do I get one bonus question?
Depends. Sure.
So it's how has social media changed your business model, if at all?
Well, I think social media, certainly is changing our society, and therefore all components within that are adapting to it. I don't think we've actually determined kind of the acceptable norms of social media, so I think, there's always room for, a combination of social and media and the internet, can create, just because you read it on a Twitter or on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And we haven't figured that out. So, we're trying to leverage social media and the digital space to tell the story. So on a positive note, you can have greater connectivity on telling the story. On a negative note, you can be in a constant. You've got on a not a negative, on a constructive note. You got to get better at telling your story, and you gotta drive transparency in a way that's easy, real, and authentic. So, real and authentic might be the same thing, but you know what I mean. But it's also got to be easy. So I don't know that social media has changed anything yet, but I think it's on the cusp of changing. How we tell our story.
We being Goodwill?
Goodwill, yeah. Goodwill and the sector.
Yeah.
And the sector. And the sector, doesn't really collaborate as well as we talk.
Yes.
And the sector doesn't look out for the sector. So we have room there for improvement as well.
Well, thank you very much. for taking the time. I know it's a busy conference, and you clearly have a key role in it.
All right.
We appreciate your taking the time, and we will definitely
My pleasure. Keep us
keep
posted.
you posted. Yep.
Let,
Yep.
let us take a look at anything that I said.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
I reserve the right to change my mind. No, I don't think I said anything. But and if it materializes, look forward to seeing it, learning from it.
It will materialize. There's you don't know us very well, but we're extremely determined and persistent. So once we decide to do something, it happens.
All right.
Now,
When
if there was a question we didn't ask, it's something, if you think of anything, we'll be around.
sure. All righty.
Yeah.
Very good. All
Excellent.
right. Did you get the bill?
I did.
All right. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Vivien
Yes.
and Linda.
Yes. Yes.
Take care.